what bank are you with? And I got to say this stone, starkly, bruv, the whole thing.
Public gatherings sometimes reveal moments that quietly reshape assumptions about human capability across time and physical change over long lifespans. One such moment occurred when Dick Van Dyke, at 97 years of age, stepped onto a floor and began to dance without assistance, staging, or visible technical support of any kind. Observers quickly recognized that the movement was structured rather than symbolic, coordinated rather than tentative, and expressive rather than cautious. The performance unfolded steadily, revealing blunt timing and control that challenged common expectations associated with advanced age and long-standing assumptions about inevitable physical decline across decades of living. For many individuals, aging is culturally framed as a process of gradual reduction in energy, range of motion, and physical confidence during daily activity. Movements become measured, pace becomes moderated, and risk is increasingly avoided rather than explored through bodily experience. Over time, these expectations become internalized, shaping how people anticipate their own later years and interpret the capabilities of others who reach advanced age. Dick Van Dyke's public life, however, developed within a framework where movement remained central rather than peripheral to identity, expression, and professional practice across multiple decades of sustained performance, rehearsal, observation, refinement, adaptation, and continuity. From the earliest phases of his career, physical expression functioned as a primary communicative instrument rather than a supplementary theatrical skill. Gesture, posture, balance, rhythm, and spatial awareness shaped how audiences perceived character, humor, and narrative emphasis within performance. His movements frequently combined technical precision with apparent spontaneity, creating impressions of ease that concealed disciplined control developed through repetition and practice. Observers often responded not only to comedic timing, but to the visible vitality produced by sustained physical engagement with space, momentum, and coordinated motion expressed across varied performance contexts throughout film, television, stage, rehearsal, demonstration, and continuous professional activity. Many widely recognized roles depended heavily on dynamic physical expressiveness integrated directly into narrative structure and character development. Coordinated rhythm, elevated posture, controlled balance, and fluid directional change defined performance style across decades. Movement functioned not as occasional embellishment, but as an organizing principle guiding timing, pacing, and expressive emphasis within scenes. This consistent integration of bodily motion into performance identity reinforced public perception that physical vitality was not temporary training, but a stable component of personal and professional continuity maintained through repeated practice, disciplined rehearsal, observational learning, and adaptive refinement across successive creative environments, collaborative settings, and evolving artistic contexts. Time inevitably alters biological systems, including muscle strength, joint flexibility, reaction speed, and recovery capacity following exertion. These changes are widely documented across populations and commonly associated with reduced physical range during advanced age. Cultural narratives often translate biological change into assumptions about inevitable inactivity. Over decades, these expectations become normalized within social perception and personal planning. By late life, movement is frequently interpreted as residual rather than developmental, limited rather than expressive, cautious rather than exploratory. Dick Van Dyke maintained a different orientation, emphasizing continuity of motion through consistent daily activity, balance training, and ongoing engagement with coordinated movement. His stated philosophy emphasized regular motion rather than intermittent intensity as the primary support for functional preservation over extended periods of living. The guiding principle involved consistency, not competition, maintenance, not exhibition, engagement, not withdrawal. Over time, repeated movement reinforced coordination, spatial awareness, and muscular responsiveness shaped through habit. Even during later decades, he continued daily exercise emphasizing balance, posture, and controlled mobility.
You old guys out there, listen to me. I'm telling you, you can keep going for a long. I'm still dancing.
This long pattern of consistent engagement provided the functional context within which observers later interpreted his dancing as evidence of sustained capacity rather than temporary or symbolic display, disconnected from everyday physical practice maintained across many years. By his mid-90s, public appearances already demonstrated continued willingness to move, sing, and participate physically in social environments. These instances indicated sustained engagement, yet they differed from the gathering that later produced a pronounced collective emotional response. The event occurred without formal staging, structured choreography, or large production context. Music played within a shared space, and attention was initially diffuse rather than concentrated. Observers anticipated gestures aligned with advanced age, acknowledgement, minimal stepping, perhaps symbolic motion rather than sustained coordination. Instead, he oriented posture, focus, and attention toward rhythm, with deliberate readiness preceding immediate responsive movement, integrated with musical structure. The initial steps appeared neither hesitant nor exploratory, but familiar and integrated with rhythm. Arms lifted with controlled range, weight shifted smoothly across stable footing, and turning motions maintained alignment through continuous balance. Observers described the movement as unforced, indicating that expression preceded demonstration. The performance revealed preserved capacity rather than recollection of former ability. As the sequence developed, attention shifted gradually from dispersed observation to focused watching. Conversation diminished, recording devices appeared, and silence expanded across the room as movement continued with stable pacing and consistent coordination, sustained throughout the unfolding physical expression, observed collectively by those present within shared attention. Cognitive interpretation preceded emotional response for many observers. Initial processing involved attempts to categorize what was occurring within familiar explanatory frameworks. As the performance continued without interruption, interpretive uncertainty diminished and effective reaction increased. Facial expressions shifted from curiosity toward recognition of sustained physical function. Some individuals leaned forward, others remained still, and several displayed visible emotional response. The observed capacity contradicted internalized expectations regarding late-life movement. Recognition of continuity across decades generated affect that was reflective rather than startled. The room collectively processed evidence of preserved expressive identity maintained through time, practice, habit, repetition, and long-sustained engagement. Motor patterns displayed during the dance reflected extensive procedural memory developed across decades of repeated practice. Directional transitions, coordinated turns, and weight transfers occurred with integrated timing rather than calculated correction. Observers recognized alignment with rhythm characteristic of trained dancers. Musical timing appeared embedded within movement rather than externally imposed. The sequence included controlled directional change, stable posture, and continuous balance maintenance following rotation. These elements collectively demonstrated functional coordination preserved beyond typical public expectation for individuals at comparable chronological age, reinforcing perception of sustained capacity rather than isolated symbolic gesture performed for representation alone within a social gathering environment. Emotional responses developed gradually as recognition of continuity increased. Observers reported awareness that the individual moving before them remained consistent with earlier public images formed decades prior. The perception of identity persisting across extended time generated reflective emotional states. Movement appeared internally motivated rather than externally directed, contributing to perceived authenticity. The dancer's facial expression remained relaxed, suggesting engagement with sensation rather than performance display. This alignment between movement and internal experience intensified observer response, producing quiet emotional reactions including tears that reflected interpretation of sustained expressive continuity across nearly a century of lived experience embodied with invisible coordinated motion. One notable element involved a rapid directional adjustment, executed with stable balance and controlled alignment. Although modest in scale, the motion required coordinated proprioceptive awareness and muscular responsiveness. Observers responded audibly, recognizing functional capability rather than symbolic vitality. This distinction deepened interpretive impact, as viewers recognized preserved coordination within an age category commonly associated with reduced stability. Emotional response spread gradually through shared recognition of physical competence maintained through long-sustained practice. The performance thus functioned as evidence of adaptive continuity, rather than exceptional departure from prior physical engagement patterns established and maintained consistently across multiple decades of lived activity. As the sequence concluded, breathing appeared steady and posture remained upright without visible strain. Applause emerged slowly, reflecting continued cognitive processing among observers. The response grew gradually rather than explosively, suggesting reflective recognition rather than immediate spectacle reaction. Individuals remained attentive, some standing, others watching quietly. The collective response indicated that the performance had been interpreted as meaningful evidence of sustained physical expressiveness across advanced chronological age. The dancer acknowledged the response briefly, maintaining composed demeanor rather than theatrical emphasis. The moment concluded with continued reflective attention directed toward interpretation of what had been observed collectively within the shared space. Following the event, many observers reported difficulty articulating their emotional responses. Descriptions frequently referenced hope, reconsideration of aging, and recognition of personal continuity. These interpretations reveal how physical demonstration can influence expectations regarding later life. Many individuals hold internal representations of their future selves, shaped primarily by observed decline in others. When an alternative trajectory becomes visible, cognitive frameworks adjust temporarily to accommodate new information. Emotional intensity arises from this restructuring of expectation, not merely from admiration of unusual physical performance. The observed movement functioned as a reference point for reconsidering how identity might persist across extended temporal experience and lifespan. Psychological research examining future self-perception suggests that individuals commonly anticipate progressive reduction in physical capability over time. These expectations shape motivation, planning, and emotional orientation toward aging. When direct observation contradicts anticipated decline, perceptual adjustment may occur, accompanied by heightened affective response. The dance provided such observational contradiction, presenting a visible example of continuity rather than reduction. Observers integrated this information into personal expectations, producing reflective emotional responses linked to revised conceptualization of possible developmental pathways across long temporal spans, including preservation of expressive movement beyond previously assumed functional limits associated with advanced chronological age within everyday social experience. His long practice of daily movement illustrates principles of adaptation through repetition. Regular activity reinforces neuromuscular coordination, spatial orientation, and functional responsiveness over time. The approach emphasizes continuity rather than intensity, aligning physical demand with sustainable engagement. Observers interpreted the dance as the visible outcome of long consistent practice, not as isolated achievement. This interpretation framed the event within a broader pattern of lifelong engagement with physical expression. Movement functioned simultaneously as maintenance, identity, and continuing participation in lived experience across decades, reinforcing perception that capacity reflects accumulated habit, rather than momentary exertion disconnected from ongoing physical engagement maintained through daily living. The event also highlighted distinction between longevity and sustained participation in physical activity. Biological survival alone does not guarantee continued engagement with movement or expression. Observers recognized that the performance reflected voluntary involvement rather than necessity. This perception emphasized agency within aging, suggesting that choice regarding activity may remain operative longer than commonly assumed. The dancer moved because he chose to move, not because external demand required demonstration. Observers interpreted this autonomy as integral to emotional impact, linking physical capability with sustained personal agency across extended chronological development and lived experience expressed through continued voluntary participation in coordinated physical movement across life. Observers familiar with earlier performances recognized continuity in rhythm, posture, and expressive timing. These qualities linked present movement with historical memory, compressing temporal distance between decades. Perceptual experience resembled simultaneous awareness of multiple life stages embodied within a single physical presence. This phenomenon contributed to emotional intensity by integrating recollection with immediate perception. Movement appeared not as remnant but as continuation of established expressive identity. Observers interpreted the performance as evidence that attributes associated with earlier life can persist within present embodiment, altering perception of temporal separation between past and current lived experience expressed through coordinated physical motion. Witnessing such continuity can influence interpretation of personal memory across time. Qualities commonly associated with youth appear not as fixed historical artifacts but as ongoing attributes expressed through maintained engagement with activity. Observers describe this perception as stabilizing, producing feelings of reassurance regarding identity persistence. Comfort emerged from recognition that expressive capacity may endure across long spans of lived experience. This response reflects emotional significance of perceived continuity, which can exert stronger influence than transient excitement generated by spectacle alone. The observed dance therefore functioned as experiential confirmation of enduring personal identity, expressed through sustained physical engagement across advancing chronological development. Another interpretive dimension involved recognition of long-term behavioral consistency, supporting observed capacity. The performance did not appear sudden or unexplained, but aligned with decades of daily practice. Stretching, controlled movement, and sustained attention to physical function accumulated incrementally across years. Observers interpreted this pattern as evidence that long-duration habit can produce significant preservation of coordination. The visible result appeared exceptional, yet its foundation consisted of ordinary repeated activity performed consistently across time. This interpretation framed the event as culmination of sustained behavioral patterns rather than isolated instance of uncharacteristic exertion, disconnected from everyday lived physical engagement maintained through continuous practice. Integration of age into performance formed another significant interpretive theme among observers. Movement did not appear in opposition to chronological development, but in continuity with it. Each decade of experience appeared incorporated into coordination, awareness, and expressive control. The performance thus represented integration rather than resistance. Observers perceived alignment between lived time and present action, producing interpretation of harmony rather than conflict between aging and identity. This perception contributed to emotional depth associated with the event, as observers recognized continuity of self-expression maintained through adaptation rather than diminished by passage of time across decades of sustained embodied experience. After the gathering concluded, ordinary activity resumed within the shared space, yet memory of the performance persisted among participants. Recordings circulated widely, allowing repeated viewing and reflection. The act of sharing extended interpretive impact beyond those physically present. Individuals encountering the recording experienced similar reconsideration of expectations regarding aging. The event functioned not only as performance but as reference for discussion of sustained physical capacity. Its influence extended through conversation, interpretation, and personal reflection among diverse observers encountering the documented movement and integrating it into their understanding of aging, identity, and continuity across long spans of human experience. The dancer did not present the movement as demonstration of exceptionality, but as continuation of established personal practice. Observers interpreted this ordinariness as significant, since it indicated that sustained capability had become integrated into routine life. The absence of overt effort or emphasis reinforced perception of continuity. Movement appeared neither forced nor compensatory, but characteristic of ongoing engagement. Observers responded to this quality by interpreting the performance as evidence that sustained practice can become normalized within daily living, shaping functional capacity across decades without requiring extraordinary circumstance or unusual environmental conditions to produce visible expressive continuity. The emotional significance of the event therefore derived from recognition of preserved human capacity rather than spectacle. Observers confronted evidence that common assumptions about inevitable decline require qualification. The performance did not deny biological change, but demonstrated that adaptive continuity remains possible under conditions of sustained engagement. Emotional responses reflected this cognitive adjustment, producing reflective states oriented toward reconsideration of personal developmental expectations. The dance thus functioned simultaneously as physical expression and interpretive stimulus, influencing how observers conceptualized long-term identity, embodiment, and participation across advancing chronological experience within lived human social environments, structured by cultural expectations. Physical expressiveness also conveyed experiential meaning beyond measurable capability alone. Observers perceived alignment between movement and affective state, interpreting coordinated motion as indicator of continued engagement with lived experience. This interpretation linked physical function with subjective vitality, suggesting that expressive movement can communicate ongoing participation in life processes. Emotional response arose partly from perceiving this integration of bodily action and experience presence. Observers interpreted the dance as evidence that expressive capacity can remain communicative across extended temporal duration, reinforcing perception of enduring participation in shared social environments shaped by ongoing coordinated physical expression maintained through sustained, lived embodied engagement. Such observations prompted broader reflection regarding developmental trajectories across lifespan experience. If continuity of function remains possible, then expectations of inevitable reduction require reconsideration. Observers integrated the performance into personal frameworks for understanding aging. Emotional response reflected this integration, as individuals revised assumptions regarding future capacity. The dance provided experiential reference for imagining sustained participation across extended time. Interpretation, therefore, extended beyond immediate observation into projected self-understanding. The event functioned as catalyst for reconsidering developmental possibility, not through abstraction but through direct perception of preserved coordinated physical function across advanced chronological age embodied visibly within shared social context. The event also demonstrated how collective witnessing amplifies interpretive meaning beyond individual perception. Shared attention created mutual recognition of significance. Observers monitored one another's reactions, reinforcing awareness of emotional response. Silence within the room functioned as collective acknowledgement of importance. Applause developed gradually, reflecting shared interpretive processing. The presence of multiple observers transformed individual recognition into communal experience. Meaning emerged not only from physical movement, but from collective interpretation of that movement within a shared environment. This social dimension contributed significantly to emotional intensity, reinforcing perception of witnessing sustained human expressive continuity together within a single experiential moment. Interpretation of the dance extended beyond immediate sensory perception into broader reflection regarding human potential across time. Observers considered implications for health, identity, and participation in social life. The performance served as reference for discussing sustained functional capability. Its significance derived from alignment between observable movement and internalized questions regarding developmental trajectory. Observers evaluated personal habits, expectations, and future orientation in relation to the visible example. The dance therefore functioned as experiential evidence informing reflective consideration of long-term human capacity expressed through sustained, coordinated physical engagement across advancing chronological development within lived social experience. Dick Van Dyke did not present theoretical argument regarding aging through verbal explanation. Instead, physical movement functioned as demonstration of lived continuity. Observers interpreted this embodiment as direct experiential evidence that expressive identity can persist across extended time. The performance therefore communicated through action rather than statement. Meaning emerged from perception of sustained coordination, balance, and engagement. Observers integrated this perception into broader understanding of developmental possibility. The dance became reference for considering how physical practice may influence long-term function across decades, shaping perception of aging within lived embodied human experience observed collectively and interpreted through shared awareness. The broader significance of the event lies in its capacity to alter interpretive frameworks regarding aging. Rather than presenting decline as sole trajectory, the performance introduced visible evidence of sustained capacity shaped through lifelong engagement. Observers integrated this information into personal understanding of development across time. Emotional response reflected recognition that continuity remains possible even within advanced chronological age. The dance therefore functioned as experiential reference supporting reconsideration of long-term identity, embodiment, and participation in social life. Its meaning derived from observation of preserved expressive physical function maintained across extended temporal experience within shared lived human environments. Ultimately, the dance represented continuity of identity, expressed through movement across nearly a century of lived experience. Observers interpreted the event as demonstration that sustained engagement with physical expression can preserve functional capacity and communicative vitality. Emotional responses reflected recognition of harmony between aging and ongoing participation in lived experience. The performance illustrated integration of past and present embodiment within a single coordinated physical expression. Observers recognized persistence of self across time, reinforcing perception that identity can remain continuous through adaptation rather than reduction across extended chronological development within lived embodied human experience expressed through sustained coordinated movement. The gathering therefore provided more than a display of physical skill. It offered a visible illustration of sustained human expressive capacity across extended time. A single individual moved, an audience observed, and widely held assumptions regarding aging were reconsidered through direct perception. The event demonstrated that long-sustained engagement with movement can preserve expressive function across decades. Observers responded not only to performance but to what it revealed about continuity of identity through time. The dance became enduring evidence that sustained embodied participation can remain visible within advanced chronological human life when movement remains integral to daily lived experience throughout.